These stones in this fortress look slightly different from all the others, and that's for a reason. The layout of the ruined city of Osgiliath can tell a lot about the culture that built it. Even the designs of the doors of hobbits' houses tell us about their society and culture. Tolkien had hundreds of pages to describe the astonishing world and all the backstory. The films couldn't do that. There is no time to directly explain all that history through dialogue. But they have the visual side of things, so that's where architecture comes in as a silent narrator, showing us centuries of history without a single word. I'm going to analyze these architectural details in depth. I want to break down how they work and what they mean, and where their real-world influences come from, why they make Middle-earth feel so authentic, and why that level of detail is exactly what makes Peter Jackson's trilogy a masterclass in world-building. In this video, I will talk about Rohan, because it is a great example of how architecture elevates the story. We mostly see two locations of this realm, Helm's Deep and Edoras. Helm's Deep fortress was built by an advanced civilization, by early Gondor at the height of its power, basically an offspring of Numenor, with a lot of technology and craftsmanship. They knew how to work with stone, so this is really impressive stonework. The masonry is consistent and regular. The blocks here are well cut and really large. The blocks of that size are really challenging to handle, and they indicate a civilization with solid experience with architecture. Still, the blocks are not perfectly polished, as it's just a fortress, and I love how we can feel that these stones are really old because of all the chips and imperfections. Here is a real-life example of an ancient fortress wall for comparison. Go check out my video about that amazingly preserved city. And then we can see how Helm's Deep was repaired by later generations, by the current owners. The people of Rohan live mostly in villages, and they don't have much experience working with stone. So this stonework is rough and uneven. The blocks are even not rectangular, just raw pieces of stone, exactly as they were quarried, simply placed there without much processing. The blocks are smaller, and such ones can be easily handled by 1 or 2 men. Also, this technique is quite similar to the stonework we will see in Edoras in the second part of the video. And then there are the unrepaired parts, cracked and crumbling stone, clearly neglected. This dilapidated state tells us so much. Rohan isn't really flourishing these days. It doesn't have capability to maintain the fortress properly. Seriously, what a culture Gondor of the Second Age was back then in the days. And now, no monument protection policies, no restoration efforts. I hope the king will return someday and finance much-needed restoration works of this monument. There's one more amazing detail that shows that the movie creators were really 100% sure about what they were doing with their architecture. Note this. The walls of the keep are built of stone blocks, but here is this part in the heart of the keep which isn't built at all, but rather cut directly out of the mountain, out of the rock monolith. When we get to see this part closer, there are indeed no joints in the wall, no seams between the stone blocks, because there are no stone blocks, just the natural solid rock face. And they are 100% consistent with it. For example, this is the Great Hall. It is inside the mountain, so the walls and the floors are all natural rock surfaces. And for each of the scenes in every part of Helm's Deep, somebody, probably Alan Lee, kept in mind, like, was it happening in the built part or in the rock cut part? That's how much thought went into the architecture. Also, the tower with the Horn of Helm hammerhand is built in a way that makes total sense. Look, the lower stones are larger, while the upper ones are smaller. That is a practical thing, because you don't want to lift bigger blocks that high. And plus, it looks better. The solid base makes the tower feel grounded, while the upper part appears lighter. Finally, I must admit, Helm's Deep has some horrible flaws as a fortress. But honestly, that's just how movie fortresses work. There's nothing to do with that. So there could have been a drawbridge here, of course, and the orcs wouldn't bring their ram so easily. A moat in front of the wall is a basic thing, but here we see plain lead. The merlons are absurdly low and they don't provide decent cover. Look how exposed these guys are. Basically, it's only Gimli who's really protected here. And there is no gate in this inner wall at all, just an open arch. Imagine how problematic it would be for the orcs to carry their arm all the way here under the arrows and stones, and also good luck turning it 90 degrees in this narrow passage and trying to smash the gate. Instead, they just enter through this archway freely in seconds. And the reason for all that is The Lord of the Rings is a movie. And fortresses in films aren't designed for realistic defense. They're built for more like epic cinematic battles. The orcs need to charge in with ladders and their ram. The elves need to appear proudly in all their coolness, be visible, not really protected. So a realistic moat or drawbridge would definitely be helpful for the defenders, but it would just slow things down from the movie maker's point of view. Alright, so this was a great fortress of Rohan built by someone else. Now let's see how good the Rohirrim are as architects themselves. But before that, I should say, this video will very likely be demonetized, so if you want to support me, I left a Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. I will be very grateful for your support. So, Edoras is the capital of Rohan. It's not huge, since the Rohirrim mostly live in villages. It doesn't even have a stone wall, just a wooden palisade. While we're here, I want to appreciate something. This isn't CGI. Both the landscape and the palace on the hill were actually built, full scale, for filming. Only these houses on the left are CGI. The main building here is called Meadowseld, or the Golden Hall. And architecturally, it's a very interesting fusion of traditions. The name Meadowseld literally means mead hall in Anglo-Saxon language. That's an actual type of a building, a long house with a single hall, used by Vikings and Anglo-Saxons as well in the early Middle Ages. Similar types can be seen among other cultures as well. There were kings' residences and gathering centers, but here there is much more happening than just a mead hall. Look, there is a decorated part with a grand entrance, the main facade designed to impress. Inside, we see a long colonnaded space leading to a raised podium with a throne. It is a focal point. It looks more special because of decoration and light. This all is a rather complex organization of space. Such compositions do not just appear in isolation. So as Rohan doesn't have a huge architectural tradition, where could it draw its inspiration? In the movies, it looks like this all could have been inspired by Gondor. The main hall of Minas Tirith follows a very similar layout, the grand facade and a long hall leading to the most important place, the throne. In real-world architecture, this processional layout is typical of European basilicas, but Gondor deserves its own deep dive, so we'll save that for another video. Ornamentation in Meadowseld closely resembles Nordic motifs. This wood carving here likely was inspired by the decoration of medieval wooden stave churches in Norway. We also see the wooden arches that are similar, and this knot-like ornament is rather typical as well. These wooden capitals, though, are a fantasy of the set designers. Well, it's possible that they were inspired by some Achaemenid motifs. They are somewhat similar. And I love how realistic the horse heads are, exactly what we would expect from a culture of horsemen. Apparently there were just 2 statues of men in the whole Rohan, and they only managed to keep one intact, but there are dozens of really nice horse images. Speaking of the materials in Edoras, the majority of the structures are wooden. Stone is only used to construct platforms for buildings. And the stonework is rather rough and uneven, similar to what we've seen in Helm's Deep repairs. Also, the royal tomb portals are made out of stone, and I love how the ornaments and the surfaces are imperfect. The ornaments are very simple, and this all makes sense considering the little stoneworking experience of this culture. The second greatest building of the capital after the royal palace is not built for people but for horses. Is anybody surprised by that? The stables of Edoras have somewhat palatial look with the carving on the doors and beautiful columns inside. Note also the special stall for Shadowfax, the horse of Gandalf. Originally, the designers wanted to give him his own floor to showcase his statues, but they ended up making him preside over all the other horses, which is also rather cool, isn't it? And I have to admit, as magnificent and deep the depiction of Edoras is, as all the land around is lacking in life. There should be, of course, small hamlets and roads and hedges, especially around the capital city, but we're just shown one village. I am nitpicking here, of course, not that any movie has ever been perfect in this aspect. So, these were just a couple of locations, but there is much more to explore. Subscribe, for I call you to ride with me to Minas Tirith. Gondor calls for architectural analysis, and we will answer.